Licensed games have long been regarded by industry critics as half-hearted cash grabs. For every exception like GoldenEye or 2018's Spider-Man, there are countless forgettable failures attempting to pillage your wallet through emotional allegiance to a beloved franchise.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
On the heels of Miles Morales shocking my socks off and the wizarding world finally making an attempt to use its license to make something better than this beautiful work of art, I've been mulling over my time with Marvel's Avengers. We can't all ascend to be greater than Haggard, but you know what the game could have done? Made quality a priority. Shout out to Square Enix for providing a review copy. I've spent the last few weeks digging 50 hours deep into their take on the live service craze, and suffice it to say, I've come out less than enthused. If I were to give an award for the most frustrating game of the year, Marvel's Avengers would take the dishonor handily. And yes, that includes the divisive Last of Us Part 2. While I may not have been sold on the storytelling, I can at least appreciate the risks they took along with their marvelous technical achievements in graphics, sound design, character performances, accessibility, and gameplay. Marvel's Avengers isn't absent of redeeming qualities, far from it. What it does lack is the necessary focus to deliver a consistently excellent experience. A vision tainted by a desire to keep an active player base above all else, without delivering content deserving of that attention. What you're left with is a baffling disconnect between what the game does well and shit that is so transparently designed to keep you busy, entertaining or not. Can you guess the results? A player base dropping faster than me hitting the F5 key on my PlayStation 5 pre-order page when I saw Demon's Souls Remake was a launch title. Today, I'd like to break down this distorted development philosophy into 3 parts: the good, the bad, and the ugly. I will check every Skinner box in their playbook to show you exactly what led to the dismal landscape for the future of Marvel's Avengers.
This drink, I like it. Another!
Like the trifecta of downsloping quality I've split this video into, the best bits of the Avengers can be broken into 3 distinct pieces. We'll start with a broad stroke of something the game largely nails: its campaign. Before you can partake in the grandiose online cooperative world boasted by the advertising, you'll need to play through the story. I'll give a warning that I may spoil minor story details, so if you'd like to skip them, skip to the timestamp on screen in 3, 2, 1. Your entry character is Kamala Khan, the perfect conduit for a Marvel nerd to play through. She is a geeked out Avengers fangirl, a solid lens from which you can be introduced to the main cast. Seeing her excitement made me genuinely excited, and I began to invest in her quirky charm. An ideal emotional attachment to make, considering after the initial A-Day hype wears off, you're left with her on a solo quest to reunite the Avengers. As you bring the team together, their personal conflicts create emotional tension that guides the pacing well toward the antagonist's evil rise. The writing is serviceable with the right amount of comic cheese and blockbuster banter. In many ways, it feels like the tried and true MCU origin story translated to a video game on a grander scale involving the main Avengers. The blockbuster gravity is carried well by a star-studded voice cast. Nolan North channels his inner Cade Six with a touch of emotional Nathan Drake as Tony Stark. Troy Baker delivers a moody, subdued performance as a troubled Bruce Banner in typical masterclass fashion. Laura Bailey shreds her ticket to the gun show for stealthy dexterity in the shoes of a 90s shampoo commercial looking Black Widow. Travis Willingham perfectly captures the essence of Thor's godly bravado and mild arrogance. Jeff Sheen oozes Boy Scout charisma as Cap, and if you told me Sandra Saad was an awkward nerdy fangirl, I'd have believed you in an instant. She's that convincing. They all are. The MCU is such a juggernaut that it's gonna cast shadows over different adaptations for decades to come. With that in mind, I think all 6 Avengers killed their performances. It's thanks to them the predictable story beats are given emotional weight. They're assisted well by Crystal Dynamics' experience from Tomb Raider, allowing them to seamlessly craft high-octane cinematic sequences that are visually impressive, fun to play, and shake up the predominant gameplay loop. Moments like desperately running away from a feral Hulk, blasting into outer space as Iron Man in a death-defying stunt, and the intro highlight reel of ass kicking through each Avenger's shoes is marvelously done. Outside of these sequences, the majority of gameplay is filled with combat, far and away the biggest strength of the game. I fully expected these heroes to play like lukewarm derivatives of one another. Much to my surprise, while they do share a few system mechanics, each plays dramatically different with extensive depth. Shared mechanics include a set of light, heavy, and ranged attacks for each hero. Through different combos, intermixing held versus press buttons, a variety of ranged options, different traversal methods, and character-specific tools through a special meter, you'll quickly find multiple viable playstyles for each hero that are wildly different from their counterparts. For example, Miss Marvel can fist enemies from a distance, while Cap tosses his shield, and Black Widow busts dual caps in your ass. Then there's the unique intrinsic traits measured through the meter I mentioned. Kamala's allows her to auto-dodge incoming attacks and do bonus damage, with a bonus if you time activation on enemy attack windups for a parry. Hulk's rage meter buffs his attack power and rewards him with HP for all damage dealt. Iron Man's meter functions as a restriction of his triple-faceted ranged options, quick-firing repulsors, focused lasers, or slow but devastating rockets, forcing him to intermix melee to regain meter faster for optimal DPS. Black Widow builds meter as she attacks without taking damage, maxing out for a high-skill, high-reward damage buff when the meter is full. Captain America can block all incoming attacks with a parry or a thunderous slap, while Thor can explode with lightning, stunning attacking enemies and increasing stun damage. Each hero also has unique support, assault, and ultimate heroic abilities. Kamala can high-five enemies out of existence, burst heal herself and allies, along with her ultimate flex Embiggen, increasing damage and opening new combo routes. Hulk can play the tank by aggroing all nearby enemies with a hyped-up ground pound that buffs his defenses. He can dash, grab, and brutalize a single target, or end battles with a decisive standing ovation. Iron Man can overcharge for infinite meter, bonus damage, and a shielded aura, fire off a concentrated unibeam, and call in the Hulkbuster for a little smashing of his own. Black Widow can cloak all allies for a strategic save or coordinated strikes, shock enemies to pin them down for bonus damage over time, and overcharge herself with a beatdown baton. Cap can lead the charge with a slam that weakens enemy defenses, do a powerful multi-toss with his shield, or slam it even harder for a damage buff and new combo route that makes his shield an enemy tenderizing yo-yo. Thor can shock things, trap and shock things, and yeet himself from the Bifrost into enemies like a mythological base cannon. This is just scratching the surface of each hero's kit. There are mastery and move-specific augments that gradually elevate you into a specialized powerhouse through one of many viable builds that perfectly matches your chosen playstyle. The customization and depth is spectacular. Most importantly, everyone is an absolute blast to play. Miss Marvel is a shifty support that packs a hefty punch in the right hands. Hulk is a rage battery that shits damage while soaking it up for the squad. Iron Man is a flying armory with a diverse kit that allows him to shine in any situation. Black Widow juggles enemies with ease to pin them down while darting around to avoid and maximize damage. Cap perfectly blends defensive and offensive options while manipulating the odds in your team's favor. And Thor is Flying Thunder Kratos. I cannot overstate how satisfying thunking enemies with his hammer is. At its core, the combat has excellent depth, high entertainment value, and personalized design. It was the sole driver that carried me through many of the game's later hours rampant with warts. Marvel's Avengers is no toad in the looks department, however, with my final appreciation being its graphical prowess. When it's firing on all cylinders, it's a spectacular showcase of bombastic particle effects, slick animations, and beautiful splashes of color. The keyword here being when it's firing on all cylinders, but we'll get to that. Let's just say if you were to take a screenshot of the action, it's sure to impress. Almost as impressive as today's sponsor, Displate. Are you tired of sticking paper posters on your wall with sticky tack only for it to eat your poster, your wall, and your soul? Metal posters, baby. Just stick an easy peel sticker on your wall, slap a magnet on it, then boom, poster on the wall. They've got over 800,000 designs for you to mix and match with ease through the power of magnets. The print quality is stellar, delivery is lightning quick, and they plant a tree for every poster you buy. I love the mission, and I'm thrilled to ditch paper posters for high quality prints built to last. Head on over to Displate via my link in the description to save 33% on your order. Any purchases made support the channel, so I appreciate anyone who picks up some dope art for their wall. Marvel's Avengers' well-delivered blockbuster story with grand set pieces, excellent performances backed by impressive graphical effects, and killer combat design is similarly dope. In isolation, these are all spectacular elements of the game that I commend wholeheartedly, which is the final nice thing I have to say.
I have nothing to prove to you.
If you've seen my video on why difficulty matters, you might recall that I split difficulty into 3 distinct categories. Curated experiences that match high difficulty with great design that makes grueling trials rewarding to overcome. Games that challenge your strategery rather than traditional dexterity-based response time, and games that offer multiple difficulty settings, adapting to your personal skill and pushing you to become a better player through inventive changes. No matter the option, the ideal destination is an experience where all the challenges you face are rewarding. Of these paths, difficulty options are the hardest to balance. When you create multiple toggleable settings that primarily alter enemy HP and damage, games often lack dedicated design for every possible scenario that makes these fluctuating elements unbalanced. Lack of balance can lead to overly easy steamrolls or near impenetrable walls of frustration. This is Marvel's Avengers in a nutshell. 4 difficulty settings that change enemy HP, damage, and progressively make incoming attacks unparryable. This is controlled through increases to enemy power levels. If you aren't familiar, some games have a gear score that makes the same enemy design do more or less damage, depending on how you stack up in an arbitrary dick measuring contest. This is a patchwork way to pad out games with the same enemy fodder and gate you from participating in certain activities until you grind out the lower levels. It's a cheap way to provide the illusion that you have something rewarding to do. Let's assume you look at these 4 settings and say, okay, playing with a power handicap the whole game, making enemies nuclear damage sponges would suck. So you pick the normal difficulty. When power levels are standardized, the game leans toward the easier end. Easy isn't necessarily bad as long as it's rewarding, making the pressing question, does it feel rewarding? Yes and no. The thrill of playing as the heroes made me overlook the lapses in challenge because I was having so much fun. Execution does require understanding of your hero, how to best utilize their toolkit, and what works best against each enemy type. That said, did I ever come away from an encounter with a rush of, oh man, I can't believe we pulled that off? Absolutely not. There are only a few enemy configurations I would consider tough, and not for the right reasons. Enemy typings fall into 4 categories: tissue paper that can block, elite enemies, and ranged enemies. When you're rushed down by tissue paper, it's a Dynasty Warrior style bloodbath. Tissue paper that can block is manageable as long as you use the readily available abilities to break through. Elite enemies, on the other hand, are priority targets that deal and absorb heavy damage. You would assume a high concentration of these would create the tough conditions I suggested. Once again, absolutely not. Ranged enemies are busted. They are tankier than the standard trash, dish out more damage than most foes from any range, and have absurd tracking on their attacks. I use the word absurd often, but this time I really mean it. Look at this! What the fuck is this? The game is only difficult under a single condition: when you are pinned in a clusterfuck sandwich of ranged enemies with god gamer aim and tracking that melts you before you can say nerf this immediately. I appreciate the thought behind forcing you to be more aware of your surroundings. I understand they expect certain heroes like Iron Man to clean up these mobs with his range capabilities, while melee focused heroes lock down the ground. Under ideal conditions, this can work, but assuming it does, you eliminate the only notable challenge the game has to offer. Enemies don't have crazy complex movesets or mechanics to work around. They're serviceable, but it's not the mechanics that overwhelm you. It's sheer numbers and a nearly unreactable tracking ranged attack whirlwind. Maybe you thought bosses would save the day. Nope. They do have unique mechanics that I appreciated, but they're nothing otherworldly. And there are only 6, 3 of which are giant bland machines, with a license that has hundreds of villains to pull from.
Perfectly balanced.
The difficulty is anything but. You're either getting railed from a distance or stomping the game into once enjoyable power fantasy that declines dramatically in entertainment value over the course of extremely repetitive mission structure. If you were starry-eyed during the adequate variety the campaign offered in its 10-hour run for all the fresh post-story content, Avengers is gonna Hulk bust your balls. Here is every mission type offered in Avengers. Eliminate regular enemies deemed high priority, replay one of 4 boss battles, defend a circle with a password, defend 3 circles, defend 3 allies, rescue captured allies, and destroy environmental objects. That's it. These objectives are mixed and matched depending on the length of the mission. Either you have a single of these objectives or multiple strung together. Your only reprieve in between are chests spread in a wide linear area for extra loot that only serve to gear you for more of the same. I cannot overemphasize how repetitive this loop is. Post-campaign, you receive a lengthy mission that has minuscule story relevance. It's basically, the baddies are still out there, Avenger. Your work isn't done here. Spend 20 hours repeating a shuffled playlist of these mind-numbingly simplistic objectives until you complete the mission chain. I wanted to give you a taste of the full experience, so I went down that lengthy road to complete that chain. Throughout it, you discover the primary endgame activity, hives. Consider these the equivalent of Destiny strikes. You get tossed into a building, go down 6 to 14 floors, each floor having a random selection of one of the aforementioned mission typings. Attack and defeat those enemies, Avenger. Defend that power node, Avenger. Defend that circle, Avenger. Defend those allies, Avenger. Destroy those power nodes, Avenger. Lose yourself to the repetition, Avenger. You have to do these hives countless times to complete this mission chain. You do the same mission over and over to get to doing longer versions of the same missions over and over to ultimately level your character all the way to the max for what? The Mega Hive. Their raid equivalent, which is an 8-part mission chain of, you guessed it, 8 fucking hives with the same mission over and over. That is your weekly reset activity. They expect you to run after this rotten carrot every single week at the opportunity of 0.1% of loot that only serves to help you repeat this activity further. I am floored. They shipped the game in this state. The Avengers play like a dream, and the campaign is a blockbuster blast. But when it's over, you're left with a hollow spin cycle of repetitious hot garbage. This isn't to say the game needed a long string of content post-campaign. I would have been more than happy with a handful of missions tied in with the story's ending that roped in other villains from this rich universe into a final confrontation similar to Destiny's raids. Hell, I would have been content with them fleshing out the campaign a bit further with more time for each Avenger and a few dedicated side quests. Instead, the game was designed to create the rush, the addiction, the chase that keeps you coming back for more. But it expects you to not care what the more is. Just that it's Marvel, baby! Avengers, Iron Man, Hulk smash, Cap throw shield. We deserved better than this quarter-baked attempt at developing anything remotely entertaining to do with this slick combat system. Instead, they chose the Lootapalooza route. Nobody will care if there's nothing to do as long as they have something tangible to grind for. Except it has no serious effect on the way the game plays. Loot in this game serves 2 distinct purposes. Push your power level toward the 150 cap and provide passive combat buffs. These combat buffs are increasingly noticeable as you make your way toward the endgame. That much they nailed. It was admittedly satisfying finding the exact combination that turned Iron Man into a damage machine, but they are merely augments that make your build of choice more powerful. This is admirable, but it misses out on a huge element of the loot grind that games like Destiny and Borderlands offer. In those games, you have a build for your character, but you always need a weapon to complement it. Changing weapon classes, or even a specific weapon within that class, can make a massive difference in how the game plays. In Avengers, you merely make the current tools you've had available the entire time a little bit better. I don't necessarily dislike this. Loot grinds can be time-consuming and frustrating, especially when random chance comes into play. Finding augments to complement your playstyle is rewarding. When you match it with the horrendous post-game content drip, however, you'll find that making your build stronger is much less exciting when there's no fresh content to use it against. It's a friction of the longer you play, the more satisfying it becomes to play your Avenger, but the longer you go on, the less satisfying what you have to test your Avenger against becomes. It's a slippery slope that becomes a lube-filled luge once you consider the level-gated progression. Though your power level affects your ability to do standardized damage, each Avenger's character level is what allows you to unlock their abilities. These can range from new combo branches that can break through block or stagger enemies, important but not crucial, to heroic and mastery augments that fundamentally catapult your Avenger into another league of competence. We're talking about dramatic differences in damage, defense, ability cooldowns, the works. Borderlands is exactly like this. Early on, your character chugs as you wait to unlock the web of abilities that make you a gun-toting god. The difference, again, is content. Early enemies in that game are designed to be more simplistic to make up for your lack of complexity. More important, the enemy, environmental, and mission variety is ever evolving throughout the entire experience. In Avengers, by the time you finish the story, you've seen the vast majority of what the game has to offer in all of those areas. And yet at the story's conclusion, my highest level Avenger was Iron Man at level 12 out of 50. You don't even unlock masteries until level 15. The experience does roll fairly quickly from there on, but that's assuming you make it through the endgame slog. Once again, it's a contrast between your character becoming greater while the content slips into an increasingly dull nightmare. A nightmare that only gets worse.
That's my secret, Cat.
I'm always angry.
When it's firing on all cylinders, it's a spectacular showcase of bombastic particle effects, slick animations, and beautiful splashes of color. The keyword here being when it's firing on all cylinders, because when it isn't, the game turns into a slideshow. You can look impressive in screenshots all day, but if the game doesn't run well when I'm playing, I'm not gonna be a happy boy. I have suffered through plenty of inconsistent frame rates in my time. I fought Lawrence the First Vicar in Bloodborne and survived. I dared to play Mass Effect on a PS3, and yet in my 22 years of gaming, I have never seen such erratic, migraine-inducing frame vomit. This isn't something I have to describe. The footage I'm showing speaks for itself. When you're in enclosed spaces, it rarely drops. But the moment you go into an open area and the particle effects start flying, my PS4 starts dying. On a pro version, no less. I'm no expert, but I have a pretty good idea why. They render way too many objects that could be deloaded when not in the player's view. Dmod, how could you possibly know this? Courtesy of one of the many glitches in this game. This one locking me inside a wall in an intergalactic slingshot in a way that would rival big motherfucking rigs. Speed it up and watch it go. Where the glitch stops, not even Crystal Dynamics knows. I waited to write this portion of the video until they released a massive patch that fixed over 1,300 glitches. Impressive work. Better to fix a broken game after release than not at all. Or even better, don't ship the game in this state. Rubber banding malfunctions from a hero with stretchy abilities. Thor stuck in an endless dropping loop. Black Widow doing the most terrifying She-Hulk cosplay you will ever witness. Iron Man showing up twice in the same cutscene. Costumes disappearing after you've unlocked them. Infinite loading screens preventing any story progression. Meanwhile, I'm still going where no Iron Man has gone before, into the galactic depths of Uranus. In my final moments left in our solar system, allow me to add that the patch didn't even fix everything, considering I'm still missing Iron Man's iconic outfit. But I'm coming out smelling like roses compared to recent reports online of players losing all of their game progress. Imagine being one of the 1% that has invested hundreds of hours in this game since launch and lose everything you worked for. If you buy in based on the story and combat and are willing to put up with unrewarding difficulty, repetitive enemy and mission design, a lackluster loot grind, poorly weighted character progression, awful graphical performance, and thousands of glitches, you could win the unluckiest lottery for a one-way ticket back to start. And do not collect 200 Avengers bucks. You have to pay for those. Dismissing everything else that was wrong with Marvel's Avengers, there was absolutely no excuse for launching the game in this fundamentally broken state. Taking everything else into account, I have to ask, why didn't they dedicate more time to making an incredible game instead of a heavily flawed mess with a handful of redeeming qualities? Money. For what few great qualities this game does have, the bad and the ugly all point to one hideous truth. Square Enix wanted in on the live service cash pinata equipped with only mismanaged ideas to pierce its golden center. My speculative guess is that Crystal Dynamics set out to make the absolute best game they could under the guidelines set before them. There's a reason the story is resoundingly well regarded by critics and the combat received generally high praise. These two elements are key for you to buy into the paper-thin content that follows. The promise of more narrative-driven experiences on a multiplayer scale while you dig deeper into combat is enticing on the surface, but it doesn't take long to realize how little story there is and how patchwork, lazy, and repetitive missions are. I have no doubt that in an ideal world, the devs would have loved to diversify these elements, keep a high-quality standard, and ship a bug-free experience. Budget, strict deadlines, and pressure to push for scope beyond what they can realistically produce at a high level leads to the repetitive loop we ended up with. A dry well of content the Square boardroom must have assumed gamers would be willing to lap up in large enough numbers to justify the game's current state. Superfans they can monetize through microtransactions, with 4 cosmetic categories for purchase. Nameplates that appear as your title card when playing online, emotes similar to those that have become standard in so many mainstream games, premium costumes that are by far the most unique offered, and takedowns added to a pool of random animations when you fill an enemy stun meter and do a cinematic finisher. Let's be clear that none of these affect how the game actually plays. I'd also like to add that I'm not entirely opposed to microtransactions. Context is what matters. In a free-to-play title, they make perfect sense as long as they're implemented in a balanced way that doesn't inhibit the game's pacing and quality. Where they don't belong is in a game you paid $60 for, especially for the ludicrous prices they're going for. A single premium skin is $14. 14! That's nearly a quarter of the game's full price. You're telling me that just over 4 digital costumes is valued the same as the entire experience? Well, that speaks volumes inadvertently from the horse's mouth, doesn't it? Even more laughable is how needless these cosmetics are. You're showered with plenty of these 4 groups of cosmetics while playing through the game. You'll get randomly rewarded with each as you open chests, level up, and progress your character card. Each character has one of these cards with 200 total points reached through daily and weekly challenges challenges that are easy to accomplish by playing normally. With 64 possible points per hero every week, it would take many moons to reach the peak, but who needs to? Most costumes are reskins of a few different variants, so there's no strong need to grind. I would be willing to bet you'll find one you like early on. You'll also earn store credits through those passes as well, so if you really must get something from the store, you can earn 600 credits across all 6 Avengers for free. It would take hundreds of hours of work, but the possibility at least exists. What I'm saying might seem like a good thing. I'm complaining about the microtransactions' presence and price, but then giving a compelling argument for why the game gives you ample reason never to buy them. My issue is the ramifications of including them. The clear desire to string players along for weeks while you wait for new heroes to drop for free with $10 cosmetic passes with microtransactions dangled in your face influenced the game we ended up with, and its reputation. This led to a sizable hate train charging full speed against this game from many who would otherwise be interested in a cooperative narrative-based Avengers adventure. The inability for them to put out that game not only confirmed the skepticism of its detractors, it punished those who decided to buy in. They took a game that should not be live service and tacked it on in lieu of a better, more fulfilling game in the hopes of making money long term on top of an entry fee. If they crunched the numbers and found it to be truly more lucrative to gamble a pricey licensed opportunity on a mediocre endgame with horrendously priced microtransactions in the hopes of catching a few whales, in lieu of creating a phenomenal $60 game that generates positive buzz, makes sales boom, and gives them the opportunity to expand monetarily through high-quality DLC expansions, that's a grim truth to move forward in the AAA space with. As much as I would have liked to see great elements of this game succeed in a better overall experience, I'm happy to say that truth seems to be unfounded. In its initial week of physical sales, the game sold a third of what the PlayStation exclusive Spider-Man sold in its first week in the UK on both Xbox One and PS4. Granted, physical sales may be harder to access for some right now, but it's a significant difference. More damning is the player base. Just over 2 weeks post-launch, the game is barely averaging a peak of over 5,000 players a day on Steam. Compare this to other juggernauts with loot grinds at the AAA level like Monster Hunter World or Borderlands 3, and especially the games as a service titan Destiny 2 that this so clearly wanted to be, and you'll see how comparatively pathetic the dwindling numbers are. Hell, it's most comparable to Russian Fishing 4 at the moment, a clear snub for 2018 Game of the Year. Though the console player bases are likely larger, this has to be worrying for anyone hoping for long-term support. Developing unique heroes can't be cheap, and since they're doing it for free in the hopes you'll spend $10 on a cosmetic pass for each, how well these microtransactions are thriving will really determine whether it can survive with a niche community or die out in a matter of months. And even if there's niche support from the fan base, is that enough to sustain Square Enix's expectations and recoup what was surely a massive budget? Development alone had to be pricey, but you also have to take into account the expense of securing such a hot license and the insane amount of marketing they did for the game. I'm no economics expert, but I would be shocked if this ends up as a financial slam dunk for them, especially if their overly lofty expectations of Crystal Dynamics' previous work is anything to go by. From a critical standpoint, I'm torn. I can't stress enough how fun it is to play each Avenger. The story is a perfect comic blockbuster for even casual Marvel fans to enjoy, but the problems plaguing everything else makes it extremely difficult for me to recommend. As I made this video, I became more and more frustrated at the missed potential. Crystal Dynamics absolutely has the talent to make a generationally great superhero game with an IP that'll never be hotter in pop culture. The game sadly ended up in a state far below that caliber, and if the reception and player data is anything to go by, it's deservedly dead on arrival. I am really disappointed there wasn't more to love about Marvel's Avengers, but I hope you enjoyed the video. Big thanks to Display for sponsoring it. Without them, I would not have been able to dedicate so much time to production. So please consider supporting the channel with the 33% off link in the description. Expect the Ghost of Tsushima review to finally drop in the next few days before I kick off some big projects ahead of the next gaming generation. So be sure to subscribe for all that and more. And of course, I want to thank you for watching today. Much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video. So when I say baby, you gotta smack me, okay? Metal posters, baby. No, you gotta do it faster than that. Metal posters, baby.